My Bible says that in the beginning was God, and the earth was without form. Everything was chaos. And it sort of seems like that's where we are today. Is that fair? I mean, I hear it all the time. I'm sure that you've spoke about it in some form or another. But a few weeks ago I said what? Our moral fabric has been decaying at breakneck speed. I told you that things were once shamefully hidden are now publicly celebrated. Fair? And the unimaginables, things that we thought we would never see, at least out in the Commonwealth, has now become a commonplace. Things are a little crazy, aren't they? And unbelievably crazy. But let me switch gears, and in some ways I'm not, but anybody here like salmon? All right, there's a lot of godly people in the house. I love salmon. I love salmon. And I could go on and on about the places around Sioux Falls that carries the salmon that I really, really love. But it's really the life of a salmon. I want you to listen in light of what I just said about chaos. It's really what I find how they live interesting. And I'm going to read it because I don't want to miss it. And I want you to grasp this. From conception, an egg, if you will, they immediately start moving downstream. From fresh water, of which they are birthed, to eventually to arrive at salt water, now fully grown. But once they reach maturity, they have this fanatical resolve to go back upstream to their spawning grounds, their source of origin, where it all began. Therefore, braving hundreds, even thousands of audacious miles, their venture is filled with danger as they swim against overwhelming odds. But they swim with a purpose: to return to where it all began, at least for them. And the reason why? To give life to a new generation. Trusting, hoping that this new generation will do the same. Did I tell you I love salmon? Yeah. See, I think what a picture. What a picture of what God has called all of us and purposed our lives to be. So much like the salmon that we too are willing to swim upstream, braving all overwhelming odds to reproduce for the next generation something that's worth reproducing, that they too would carry on. And it's to that I want to come to. If you've got your Bibles, a very familiar passage that we've come to many times before. If you're new to the church, then this isn't familiar to you. But it's something we like to talk about quite often, and I always fear when I talk about it that people hear it, but they don't really get it. So I'm going to tackle this in a different way, talking about what does it mean to step out into the waters, what does it mean to live a life like Christ. Matthew chapter 9, and I'm going to share some things with you. Twice you're going to hear these words: I had it wrong. Twice your pastor is going to tell you, I had it wrong. And so I want you to look at Matthew 9, and I'm going to begin in the 35th verse in a message I've entitled, 3 Things That Jesus Did. Now I'm going to go ahead and give them to you because you know what they are. But it doesn't really matter what Jesus did unless we're going to turn around and do it ourselves. Please let me say that again. It really doesn't matter what Jesus taught, Jesus did, unless it's going to take root in our lives and we're going to do the same. The Bible has absolutely no authority or power in your life unless it takes your life and moves your life to a life of action. I don't know why we can't seem to understand it. You just as well throw your Bible away, especially in America when the average household has over, if you will, 7.5 Bibles. It really means nothing to have one if it doesn't make your authority and move your life to action. So I want you to catch that as you hear these words. Matthew 9, Jesus saw people, had compassion, met their needs. Jesus saw people, had compassion, met their needs. Say it with me. Jesus saw people, had compassion, met their needs. That's what Jesus did. But I want to share with you, I had something wrong. And I want to show it to you. Matthew 9, beginning in the 35th verse. Jesus traveled, let me say it again. Jesus traveled through all the towns and the villages of that area, teaching in the synagogues and announcing the good news about the kingdom. And he healed every kind of disease and illness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. He said to his disciples, "The harvest is great, but the workers are few." So he prayed to the Lord, who was in charge of the harvest, and he asked him to send more workers into his fields. Now, I want to show you where I had it wrong. Jesus traveled, look at the verse again, the beginning. Jesus traveled through all the towns and the villages of that area, teaching the synagogues, announcing the good news about the kingdom. And he healed every kind of disease and illness when he saw the crowds. Almost every passage begins with when he saw the crowds. Where I had it wrong was that we assumed that Jesus was doing this and then he saw the crowds. That Jesus was traveling through the villages, he was teaching in their synagogues, he was healing the people. That's what he was doing. And as he was doing it, he then saw this crowd as if somehow they're separate events. That's where I had it wrong. When you look at the actual translation, it actually says this: Jesus traveled through all the towns and saw the people. When he was in the villages, he saw the people. When he was teaching in the synagogues, he saw the people. When he was announcing the good news about the kingdom, he saw the people and he had compassion. And so he healed every kind of disease and illness. Why? Because everything he was doing, Jesus saw the people and had compassion. It's not a separate clause that somehow he was doing this and now he's doing that. This is who Jesus was. And I say that because I have lived in this city for 23 years. I'm pretty sure if you blindfolded me, took me anywhere in this city and unblindfolded me, I'd know where I was at. But here's the thing is, you probably would have an argument. Maybe there is a place you could take me. I'm just posing the fact of what I think most of you feel. We know Sioux Falls. That's my point. Oh, I'm sure there's some places that maybe if someone actually blindfold us, it might take us a moment to sort of orient ourselves. Is that fair? We might even have to walk a little bit and all of a sudden, oh, now I know where I'm at. But we know this city. But doggone, I've not seen all the people. I've been all over the lanes and the highways, and I've been in so many places, and how many times I didn't see anyone. And I wonder if you feel the same. You're all going to leave me all alone up here, aren't you? No, I see them all the time, trust me. They can't drive either, okay? That's not what I'm talking about. I've been at a restaurant where the service was poor. And I just wonder if, like me, at times, I saw the service was poor. I didn't see the waitress as a person. Maybe like me, you've been in traffic and someone cut you off. That's a person behind that wheel of that car. Shocking, isn't it? But I wonder if, like me, you didn't see them as a person. You saw them as an annoying, frustrating. Maybe like me, you've stood in a line and you're in a hurry and there's that person up there talking to the attendant and they're carrying on a conversation which you could really don't care about. And like me, I didn't see them as a person. And that's where I got it wrong, because what I discovered in studying this passage even more, it wasn't that Jesus was doing this and then he did that. It's just what he did. As he's going through the city streets and all of these towns and these villages, he sees the people and he has compassion. In every moment of every breath and everything he did. Wow. I never made that connection, but it was so convicting to me as I'm realizing how much have I been doing this, and then I did that, as if somehow in this room is where I do my Christian thing, and then when I get in my car and I leave, now I get to do some other thing. And what our world needs is what we do here is what we do out there, and what we do out there is what we do in here, just as this Jesus did. Does that make sense? That was convicting to me, people. It was so convicting to me to realize how many times have I separated the two and didn't even realize it. So caught up in the world that I totally missed being the Word. The very thing that Jesus did all the time. I say that because here's the beautiful thing. Even in our lives, in my life, Jesus always sees me, and he always sees you. Isn't that beautiful? See, it starts there, doesn't it? To realize that nothing I do escapes my God. He truly loves me. There's not a breath that I take that he doesn't account for it. And of course, the scriptures say, not a hair on my head that he hasn't even numbered. And I wonder if he even gave him a name. See, that's beautiful. That's the person I want to be. And I trust that you want to be as well. So I want you to take, if you would, out your notes. And I want to walk through these differently in light of that. And again, I'm going to share with you, again, another moment where I just had it wrong. Here's the first thing. Jesus saw people. Wherever he went, Jesus saw people. Whatever he did, Jesus saw people. And I want you to say it out loud with me. Jesus saw people. I've shared this story before, but let me personalize it in just a little bit different light. A blind man, who's talking, going to be talking here? A blind man was once asked what his greatest obstacle was. We just said it. That's the obstacle. And yet how many times have I done that? A blind man, I've already put a label on it, which means now my perception is skewed. Does that make sense? How many times do I do that? The man cuts me off in traffic, and instead of being a creation of God, he is an unbelievable uncreation of God, and I put a label on it without even realizing who the person is and that God loves him. A blind man was asked, what is your obstacle? And he said, it's that right there, that you see me as a blind man. And so what do? You instantly decide then how you need to interact with me, as if you know. And therefore you give me sympathy, and I don't want your sympathy, he said, because I'm not just blind. I want you to see me. And who doesn't? I do. I would love people to see me. I wish so often that people wouldn't see me as Pastor Keith. Because the moment they put that label on it, their perception is now skewed. Therefore, they lump on me what they think a pastor should be, how I should interact, what should I say, what should I do? And you feel the same. People all around the world just want to be seen. Like a child on a playground. Someone pick me. Notice me. Ooh, over here. See me. They're all around us. Have you ever tried to put yourself in that little overweight girl in 4th or 5th or 6th grade? And she knows that everybody in the school sees her as fat. I just want you to see me. You can't get beyond the size of who I am, and so you hurl labels on me, and you don't know this incredible person on the inside that just wants you to see me. No wonder people chase labels. If I could just be the best athlete, someone would notice me. If I just got the A in the class, someone would notice me. No wonder young people take drugs, their first drink. The power of someone fitting in is worth the risk of the addiction. But now they have just another label, don't they? And they just want to be seen. Someone pick me, notice me. They're all around us, and there's so many of us right in this room right now. It might be the only reason you're here, risking that last chance. Will even God's people see me? Do you see the power of what it means if we call ourselves a Christian when we run to the door and we miss the opportunity to stay in this room to greet someone we don't know? That's where it all begins, and Jesus understood that. Nothing else matters if you don't see people. They sack our groceries. They sit beside us at work, waiting, wanting, hoping, longing to be noticed, to be loved, to be valued, of which I contend is the greatest of value when you see someone. And how many times have I missed it? How many times have I missed it? Write this down. Light, that's what we're supposed to be, right? Light in the darkness. Light begins with sight. Light begins with sight. Just write that down. Jesus said if we're going to be light to the world, as he said in Matthew 5, then we've got to open our eyes. That's where it all begins. Because Jesus said what? Because the eye is the lamp of the body. If these are bad, the whole body's bad. Nothing else matters. Our ability to be God's people in our generation begins with our ability to see this generation as God sees them. That's why we need to pray, as Jesus said in John 4, open your eyes. Open your eyes, he says, and take a good look at what's right in front of you. These are people. I'm telling you, the fields are ripe. It's harvest time. They're so hungry. So many things I'm starting to get now. It's harvest time. People want to be loved. They want to be valued, which means it's always harvest time because it's the most inner longing that God gave us. We all want to be it. We all want to experience it. Jesus saw people. Here's number 2. Jesus had compassion. Say that with me. Jesus had compassion. Do you know what that means? He really cared. I think that's what compassion is. Like he really cared. Now, again, I told you there are 2 times I've gotten it wrong. Here's the second one. Several years ago, I preached a message to our church planters entitled, "The 5 Challenges That We as Pastors Will Face in the Next Coming Years." You can write them down if you want. I'm going to give you those challenges, but I was wrong. They're not in any order. They're just the challenges that are in the church today that I told these pastors we're going to have to face. We're going to have to experience. We're going to have to deal with. I talked about the homosexual agenda. Now, I'm not here to argue whether you agree it's right or wrong. What I'm telling you is because of where certain people stand in certain issues, it's going to be a challenge in the church. It's going to be there. You're going to have to deal with it. I talked about the fact that giving will be down, which makes no sense to me. Makes absolutely no sense to me that we can build multi-billion-dollar stadiums to house an entertainment factory for 2.5 hours of our lives, and we're more than happy to give to that, but we won't give to something that has eternal value. I don't get it. We'll make investment in an automobile that eventually you'll have to give to the next generation or you will wreck. Probably have seen you drive. Anyway, I'd leave it in the garage if I was you. But my point is we will invest in all kinds of earthly things, but it comes to the church. When it comes to the kingdom, giving's low. And it continues to decline in this country. So I said, pastors, you're going to have to face that. That's a challenge. I talked about more people will crave an online experience, and then the pandemic happens, and it's more than ever. I'm cautious to say that because I'm sure there's people who are watching online, and it hurts my heart to think that you will never maybe grace the doors of a church again. I'm not saying that to attack you. I'm just saying that we all want community. And we need community. And we're starving for it. So how do we deal with that challenge that more and more this thing in my back pocket that so often now controls our lives? How do we bring that into ministry? It's going to be a challenge. I talked about the church as more consumeristic, all right, than it's ever been, which is true. More and more Christians go to a church for what they get, not what they give. And that continues to rise, which is sad, which is completely foreign, it's not even biblical. Why do you go to that church? I like the pastor. So that means when you don't, you're gone. Correct. They just don't say that. I like the music or don't like the music. I like the people or don't like the people. Which none of that is anything to do with Christianity. That's about you. Which we are supposed to die to on the altar, and then we're supposed to think more like Christ. It's not about us. It's what we can give, not what we get. But almost most Christians talk about the things they don't like in the church rather than the one who is the church. That's a reality. Study after study shows that. That's going to be a challenge. And of course, the one that's so popular, we hear so often, are young people. The moment they leave their senior year and go off to college, they drop off from church and almost all never return. Those are going to be a challenge. But I was wrong. Those aren't the challenges. I was wrong, people. They represent our challenge. We only have but one challenge. Do we care? It's the only challenge we have. It's not our political state. It's not about taxes. It says nothing. Those aren't our challenges. The challenge is do we even care? It's nothing around me. It's everything within me. 1 Peter 4 says this. Everything in the world is about to be wrapped up. So take nothing for granted. Over and over I hear people say, we're in the end times. These are the signs of the times. And I'm like, why do you keep focusing on the end times? If these are the end times, then let's get about the business. There should be urgency about it, right? So this is what Peter says. He says, stay wide awake in prayer. And watch this. Most of all, here it comes. Love each other. But watch what he says, and I think gets missed. Love each other as if your life is dependent upon it, not theirs. My ability to love has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this and this. How we love your life, my life is dependent upon it. He says, for love makes up for practically anything and everything. The original translation says love covers a multitude of sin. Be quick to give a meal to the hungry, a bed to the homeless, cheerfully. Be generous with the different things God has given you, passing them around so all get in on it. If it's words, let it be God's words. If it's help, let it be God's hearty help. That way, God's bright presence will be evident in everything. You know, William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army, was privileged to meet Queen Victoria, who was the Queen of England at that time. She simply asked, William said, what do you believe is the secret to all of your success? Do you know what he said? Some have a passion for money. Some have a passion for things. I have a compassion for people. I just love people. And everything of God begins with that love for people. And everything of God flows from that love for people. Everywhere Jesus went, he saw people and he just loved them. He just really cared. They just really mattered. They were sheep without a shepherd. But then he says this, Jesus met their needs. Say that with me. Jesus met their needs. He saw people, he really cared, he had compassion, and Jesus met needs. 1 John 3 says, let's stop just saying we love each other. Let us really show it by our actions. In 1958, the Ford Motor Company released an automobile that was a complete flop. Some of you already know what I'm talking about. $250 million investment that returned a $350 million loss. It was called the Edsel. Been many countless studies of why it was such a flop, but the common theme comes back to this. The executives of Ford sold what they liked and what they wanted rather than what the consumer wanted and needed. And I wonder if the church has done the same. This isn't the church, people. It's a piece of it. What we do out there is what matters. This doesn't mean anything. Me exhausting, trying to be a better communicator so people like what I say doesn't mean anything. Our music going to a standard where you really like it doesn't mean anything. Length of a service, conditions of this place doesn't mean anything. That's all consumerism. We're no different than the world. But it's what we do every day when we walk those streets and the highways and the grocery stores. And do we see the people the way God sees them? They're people. People that he gave his life for and found joy in doing it. That's what we are. That's the church. Only thing that matters. Jesus saw people, he had compassion, he met their needs.